Goedemiddag iedereen. Good afternoon everyone. Welcome to day one of the Netherlands Theatre Festival 2021. My name is Tobias and it's a real pleasure to introduce to you our next guest. So, how does the future of the arts look like? How do we deal with threats? How do we use everything we love, everything we have learned, and how will we seize the opportunities that will certainly be there? In collaboration with Cultuurmarketing, the Netherlands Theatre Festival invited renowned futurist, entrepreneur, author, and worldwide media commentator Anne Lise Kjaer.
Oh, thank you.
Hi, Anne Lise.
Hi, Tobias. What a nice introduction.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you. We had the fortune that we could meet already just this afternoon. We're really happy that you're here. You came all the way from Denmark this time. So before you start your speech, I thought it would be nice to have a small chat, maybe, just to get things going.
Yes.
So a futurist, are you a modern age oracle of Delphi, by the way?
Do you know what? I was very fortunate. I mean, Corona was very kind to me. And thank you very much, everyone, to come here and meet. It's very emotional because this is actually my first real gig in 2 years.
Really?
Yes. So thank you. Because it's been...
Thank you.
So thank you. Everything has been hybrid format and online and with lots of masks. So so nice to be here, really.
Well, likewise.
So I ventured out to work in Greece last year in February. I was working for The Economist to speak about the next generation youth. The theme was brain drain. Why is all the young people going out of Greece? Great question. Mm-hmm. We didn't get to do any of the events. Everything closed down, and within a month, we actually ended up being there for 4 months. We happened just to be on the border on Delphi.
Really? Okay.
And that was the day with 2 flights, sort of really like jet flights, flew over, and it was so noisy. And I said to my husband, do you think the next thing will be a war? Because everything was so scary. But we didn't get to see inside of the Delphi, but I am not a modern time oracle. In fact, all of the oracles of Delphi were women. You probably already know this. And they were drugged by the priests, and they had a script what to say. So in fact, the oracles were really ruling the big ruling families and also politics. I try more to be the soft power, diplomatic, and I'm not here to tell you about the future of the theater, but more of the arts, and maybe give you some inspirational sound bites, and maybe you can also learn how to think, work, and play like a futurist.
Wow, thank you. And yes, it's true, we didn't drug her on the way here, so that's...
Only coffee, but it was just a coffee, no smoking, so I'm fine, yeah.
Good. So, and I read about your work, I saw there's a lot of stuff online, videos also, very inspiring speeches, and I had the feeling that you have probably more, but 2 main fascinations. One is art, and the other are trends. Now, is there a comparison or relationship between art and trends?
Somehow there is, and I will go a little bit into depth about this. In fact, my first husband, Colombian, he was an artist, and so I have a background in design, actually. I used to be a clothing designer, and then I worked with cars and other things. But I saw, whenever I went into the arts, there was always the most trendiest people, and they had some quite different things going on in their head. It was not commercial. And I think I really feel that you can see a lot of where the future is going by looking at the arts. But it's also about where you look and how you look. And this is also, again, about your values, about your culture, where you are. So as a futurist, being in Greece now, sometimes we're in the Middle East or in Malaysia, and at the moment we live in our summer house in the Nordics, we do see different things, but my job is to really connect the dots across, I would say, regions, but always I look to the art. I always want to see the best museum, see a play, some music, the best coffee, of course. And that is how I engage with culture, because without culture, we do not have an identity. And this is why it's so important for all of you to think, what can my role be as a change maker in the future? So it is about the arts, it is about spotting the trends. And my little intervention here today is really to give you some of those tools. It's pretty easy. It just is about 10,000 hours practice, and then you're kind of on your way, thinking like a futurist. Yeah.
Sure. And of course, then there's also a similarity maybe between arts and trends, that in both, let's say, phenomena, narratives are being repeated or maybe contradicted or maybe created even, right?
Absolutely. You have those, and obviously we've had all of the fake news and all of that, and with media and molding the truth, we really have to sometimes step out of that and create, in a way, our own truth, being truthful to ourselves. In fact, truth and faith are some of the words that we need to rediscover, I think. It's all really very much about asking, what are my values? What are my top values? And I think this is really what the pandemic has done to us. And this work has only just started. Yes.
Okay. Last question. Of course, in preparation for this talk, of course, I had to think of that movie, Back to the Future. And there's this moment, I don't know in which of the three films, but then Dr. Emmett Brown steps out of his DeLorean time machine and he's saying something like, "The future hasn't been written yet." Do you abide by that quote?
Absolutely. I believe that the future is not somewhere we go, we create the future. And I have a very close connection to Back to the Future because...
How so?
Yeah, I mean, two things. When I was about 21, I finished my education as a designer, and then before I started my job, I took a world trip and I went to Hollywood and I went into the stage of Back to the Future. And you know, sometimes when something happens early, then it sort of haunts you again. And I was asked for a few media in America to as a futurist to speak about what did that film get right, and there's quite a few interesting ones. So the future is not somewhere we go, we create it, and there was a lot of interesting pointed towards the future. They got a lot of things right in that film, or in the films, yeah.
Interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, Anne Lise Kjaer.
Thank you, Tobias, thank you. So, great questions there, and I really think that often the arts reflects what's going on in the world. And this is from the biennale, the Art Biennale in 2019 in Venice. And it was interesting that, obviously, none of us knew what was going to happen a year later. The theme was, "May you live in interesting times." We went to, among others, the Nordic Pavilion, and they had a piece called Forecasting, basically weather report, Forecasting Futures. And when I walked around this amazing event with so many different kinds of art and also performances, I saw it with some of the pieces I saw, some of the artists really acted as futurists. And I thought the subtitle could have been A World in Crisis. Now, obviously, we've seen the pandemic, we've had a volatile global politics, there's a lot going on still, and we haven't really seen the beginning of many things, crisis upon crisis. More so, I think the very values that we've taken for granted, we've based our futures assumptions on, they are being challenged. And in that context, I think there are two things that needs to happen. We need to sort of retest our values parameters. What are the most important values? And what will the moral compass of the next, say, 100 years look like? And that's a big question, really. It is really a matter of coming up with great ideas for new models, but ideas alone are not enough. In fact, we need to reach beyond what we know today and then understand how we can create new models for the future to cultivate creativity and curiosity. Now, as a futurist, I always say to look forward, you have to look back. So the past and the present, somehow, it's not that you can read all the signs, but you can start to see some of the top writings on the wall. So this 100 years timeline, We can see the evolution of human history, but it hasn't just been that nice, even ride of constant progress, but rather a bumpy journey with lots of lessons to be learned. I love bold forecast, and often I look back to say, who did like a 50 years forecast or 100 years forecast? And the highlights here, Keynes, John Maynard Keynes. Back in 1929, he set up in Cambridge in England and did his vision of the future. It was a vision for his grandchildren. And he forecasted in 1929 that by 2030, economic growth in the West would have sort of come to a plateau. We would only work 15 hours a week because, as he said, we would have enough to lead the good life. Well, that's probably a very unlikely forecast. But when we look to the Nordic region where I come from, the city of Gothenburg actually tested a 30-hour work week with a lot of success because it caused people's well-being index to rise, because they had some schemes like there would be a morning team and an afternoon team. They will not be stuck in traffic. That meant there were less stress. They were less off work, happier, healthier, all of that. And in fact, also, it has had a big impact on that there was less pollution in the city. So we could obviously understand that with 30 hours a week, still with the same pay, we would be more productive, and also performance across sectors seemed to improve. Now, because of the pandemic, because of the global climate crisis, we are looking at the well-being of people and planet as some of the crucial pointer towards the future. But it's also crucial to foster a post-corona renaissance, which I put up here, which is my vision for the future, economics for humans and betterness. And we will dive into that in just a second. Now, when we look to the next normal and successfully navigating in the next normal, we understand that all organizations, all sectors need to rethink their purpose. Why do people get up in the morning, go to work with your organization? Why will audiences even come to your play? Why will anyone really engage with you? That is again about the values. I personally really love the School of Life. I think it started something like 15 years ago. It was the Swiss philosopher Alain de Botton who created that. And I like the slogan, good ideas for everyday life, because we really need that when we look into the future. He and a group of friends, writers, artists, educators, and also some psychologists, all devoted to lifelong learning, set up a program to teach people about emotional intelligence. I think that was a very interesting concept. Alain de Botton has also been quoted for saying that the pursuit of happiness, fulfillment, and human flourishing is the future of business. And this is actually why I downloaded that, because I thought, in the spirit of a theater, this was in New York Times a few weeks ago. It was the first reunion on Broadway, just the reunions of Broadway families before, they were going on stage. And it was very emotional. There was a lot of hugs. And the heading said, 1, 2, 3. Exhale. So I thought beautiful. And I think very much when we look into what will happen next, it is about tapping into new thinking, because we need that. We need to cultivate all stakeholders' interest. And this hasn't been a priority in the past, but this is what the next normal will be like. New skills are needed, and here this is very much about really understanding that curiosity, for example, in the business I'm in, the Futurist, is the most crucial skill to critical thinking. Harvard Business Review created that business case for curiosity, and there's some very interesting articles. I've been teaching curiosity for a number of years, and actually, it started back 4 or 5 years ago. I was in Dubai, and I worked with the Visa financial service companies, and they wanted me to talk about curiosity, and I was quite, flustered by that. I thought that's really interesting. But when we look there and we look at some of the also ideas from the article, one of the people who was interviews for the series of articles was the founder of Dell, Michael Dell, and he was asked, Michael, what do you think are going to be the most important leadership skills of the future? And guess what he said? I will place my bet on curiosity. Now, Bill Gates there is known to be an avid reader. There was a very interesting series about him and also Warren Buffett, two documentary on, I think, Netflix, or they can be found online. But what defined both of them was that curiosity, that they simply loved reading, finding ideas to how to solve, challenges, economic challenges, also maybe how to do better investment, how to be doing better in I would say, like inventions for the future. But really this idea of, you can say they are perhaps seen as hard-nosed businessmen, but they use creativity and curiosity in order to make a difference. But again, the question here is, how do you develop and foster a culture of intelligent curiosity? Because when I talk about curiosity, I'm not talking about being nosy. I'm talking about that, what happened before, what happened next, and what if and that, and because that is a really valuable skill. Well, I thought I will sort of bring my life story. So this is an A4 summary of my journey into the future. It started back in 1988, and I was a designer. But I really, really quickly thought, why not find out what happens before you start designing. I always say everything starts with an idea, and I was always curious to find out what happened before this happened, before that happened. And that led me really to travel around the world. I also sort of did the design thinking journey. Then I thought I could do trends. Every time I went to an exhibition, I would always go to the people with the trend books, because I thought maybe there's some secret, something I haven't discovered. And I was digging deeper and deeper until there was nobody really I could sort of get inspired by. I had to invent my own system, which I actually did with the Trend Atlas. I forecasted the 30 years into the future of the car industry. I wrote a book called The Trend Management Toolkit, a practical guide to the future. And when I look at the next 20 years, maybe 10, 20, however long I'll be working, lifelong learning, I think it's my purpose. It's where I will be taking my focus into the future. And this is also some of the tools we've invented. So this is basically the journey of how to think, work, and play like a futurist. So the first thing, because I thought, at least if you can take one or two things away from this talk, one of them should definitely be to sort of be, and I love the word amateur, because that's the love for what you do, as sort of a aspiring futurist. The thinking is very simple. It's multidimensional. But when we look to the 21st century, most people only had one P in the way they were looking at the world. And this was really P for profit. But now we're looking at the capital P in leadership being that of purpose. We really know in the work that we are doing, we are a team of artists, we are sociologists and economists, anthropologists, designers, architects, those sort of different multidisciplinary people. We all know that for people to feel fulfilled, our planet and our communities to prosper, we need to have a holistic outlook. We can't just focus in one direction. And this is what I call multi-dimensional thinking. So we need to sit a lot of people around the table in order to come up with something that's relevant. And in our context, when we sell the idea of the 4P business model, we always say that this is very simple, because once you balance people and planet and you have a purposeful ethos to match, then of course you feed into your environment rather than just feeding off it, and that leads to a sustainable bottom line. The fact that something is very hard to quantify, when I used to work with all the left-brainers in the left, in the sort of financial services, they always said, show me the money, show me the number. But you cannot verify the future because it hasn't happened yet. So really, if something is hard to quantify, it doesn't really make it any less important. On the contrary, we need to cultivate inclusion and diversity in order to connect the dots that we see out there, the trends, and then again, reconnect them. Keep asking yourself, what if? And then say, why not? So this is the thinking. The work of a futurist is, of course, to sort of collect, I like to call them postcards from the future, all of those trends here on this board, a little bit like a postcard from the future. And this is how I see the bigger picture. I study the multiple layers of society. I tap into the scientific dimension, the social dimension, which is very much about all the sort of left brain, more tangible things. But you also need to dive into people's emotional landscape, the more, I would say, softer cultural drivers. You need to dive into the values landscape, the sort of spiritual driver. It's spirituality, but without the religion. And once you have all of those layers, you understand how interconnected everything is. Every action has a reaction, and vice versa. So I think that really, when we look at this way, the 360-degree way of looking into the future, it's a good place to start, and you will obviously have that. This is our scanning of the future. It's a trend atlas, and with the trend atlas, you can then select the trends that is interesting and meaningful in your context and start creating a compass of the future. Now, it's all about an open mind, and these trends, I selected them, they're drivers of the next decade. It's many of those you will already be familiar with them, many of the trends we've seen for a while, but they have really been accelerated. Their importance has been accelerated by the corona. And all of those trends from today that we see, the signs we see, the early signals, they belong in any story about the future. And what is interesting, of course, today is to, now that you have the thinking and the work, you have a little bit of an idea of the toolkit of the futurists to understand how they will impact on tomorrow's people, the society we live in, and also culture. And anything I do and say and think, it's always seen through my 4P lens of people, planet, purpose, and then performance or profit. Now, when I speak about people, I think the most important thing to understand is that better together and creative leadership has been a topic that I've been speaking about for quite a while now. But naturally, remote everything changed all of our relationship with the world around us. It influenced how we consume, how we experience, how we work, how we socialize, or rather how we couldn't socialize. And on my last gig I did in Germany last year, I got back from Germany on the train, I met the people who did this little pop-up concept. Two graphic designers who live in Berlin. They basically live, work, and play around the world. But because the one graphic designer loved cooking, he loved music, and that couldn't really happen, they did some online performance thing and started doing a book about eating and knitting. But I could say, for me, this is very much about Corona creativity. But when we look to companies that are actually tapping into a new way of thinking of the future, I really liked IKEA's approach, which is back in 2015. In Copenhagen, they decided to open their Space 10 Innovation Lab. I mean, their purpose is, of course, to make a better future for not only the company, but also the people who work for them, the people they serve. And I think that they have done really well by selecting a global team of experts to help them rethink the future, co-create. And those experts all have completely free hands to tap into topics like food security, urbanization, and well-being. And I like when companies create those innovation labs to rethink the future. So it's very much about cultivating diversity of skills alongside openness to age and gender and ethnicity in a way to drive new innovation ideas. And we need that in order to really capitalize on that thing that happened to us. And obviously, it's part of a whole new normal. Here are two case studies. One which I like, again, to look back to see what did we see a little while back that really has impacting where the future of I would say, like here, this is television. This is, have any one of you heard of Skam? See some hands? Actually, there is a remake here in the Netherlands. I believe that creativity is obviously what keeps society ahead, and really, you know, we need to generate bold ideas. The Norwegian broadcaster NRK, they won back the audience that they had lost to YouTube and Netflix, and they made sort of a transmedia conversion series online, a web niche series that was also broadcasted on television, but it happened really online, offline, in different various places of Oslo, and then it was put together at the end of the week, and it's been so popular now. It's been a remake in the US, and it's obviously, I think 6 European countries have also had the remake, or in Denmark actually we had the original Norwegian one. But this is just one way of inventing, should I say, television and the way we actually co-create and interact. This is a very interesting art piece, and it's a whole new art direction. NFT is basically blockchain, and for you who haven't maybe not heard about it, NFT is non-fungible token, which is basically data stored on a digital ledger, so you can actually not fiddle with any of the data. Everything is transparent, and then you will actually, in this case, this is a story celebrating 2 brothers, and every year they get a donation, and when on their 18th birthday, the art piece will actually stop. And with that QR code, you can follow it online. But what is remarkable with Mika Johnson, who did, and the piece is called Save Rentar artwork, it sold for $120,000 last year, and it was also named the NFT art piece, the best one of 2020. So that's maybe interesting to look into. And simply what we see is this rise of a transformation economy with innovative hybrid format connecting us in developing a new inspiring ways. Now, looking to planet, I can say that long-termism is key to tackling the challenges that we have ahead. I like the quote by the architect and inventor Buckminster Fuller, who said that you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And I've always had that somehow in some of my talks, because I think he's so right. Now, this is Kate Raywoods, and she is a British economist, and I've come across her quite a few times. She wrote the book Donut Economics, and I know she's been in Amsterdam to help the city of Amsterdam develop some new concepts, and I think also for other cities. But it's all about 7 ways to think like a 21st century economist. In fact, her book starts with that quote. And what I would like to say that with the next generation also of economists, we are looking at a whole new way of thinking. When we look to Sweden with the Greta Thunberg, she made a really big difference to school children. It's the next generation, Futures, Friday for Futures. And of course, in London, we had the first group of Extinction Rebellion. This is from Italy, Rome, 2020, a manifestation or protest against fashion, which is having a great polluting impact on of course, our environment. But hey, this is last week in London, where Extinction Rebellion were out again, and they said this is very much a protest about the blood money on which they claim the UK is built. So we see that protest has taken on almost like a performance. It's definitely not something that we can ignore. And it's safe to say that business as usual is no longer an option, because we have to really look at well-being as a keyword to everything we say and do. Now, one of them is engaging in open dialogue and co-create the future to solve the challenges, what is ahead. And this is what defines emotional intelligent organizations. I think probably most of you know this particular installation is from 2012, and what happened was it was first launched in the Barbican Centre in London. And I really, really liked that, The Rain Room by Random International. And it was so popular, it started traveling the world. And I was in New York, I think in 2015, and I saw a long queue down 2 blocks around the block. And guess what they were queuing for, those people in the rain? The Rain Room. And you can go in there and literally, you can probably sort of sense it there. You can literally control the weather, because the sensor tells you that there is a person there and you don't get wet in the rain. Now, my friend, who is an artist, a Persian artist, invited me to go to, she was part of a group show at LACMA back in 2018. And what I was very inspired by was the Los Angeles Contemporary Museum of Art had just then bought the piece by Random International as part of their permanent exhibition. And this was actually the CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility budget, where they used that, they spent that to do this particular installation. I have that as the permanent collection to, in a way, try to sort of really address the drought in California, and this is also why we have all of the fires there. But it is extending into purpose, because when we look at economics for humans and well-being capital, really well, and it's about being, that is such an important trend, and it's well-being of people, it's well-being of the planet. And in this context, of course, betterness really connect us with the desire to build a secure future and enhance our life and the community. But it's obviously with the pandemic, what we've seen is that people are very confused about where to start. But it's not a matter of a choice. We need to really cultivate well-being across sectors. We need to understand the health of things. We need to get our information right, because that's the only way that we can create a better new next normal. And this is from the exhibition at the Danish Architecture Center from 2019. And I particularly like that. This is one of the really, really great, most important contemporary Danish architects, Dorte Mandrup. And her work is very much about making buildings that becomes a natural extension from nature. They don't stand out like big pieces that you almost sort of stumble over them. It's more that she wants to make something that blends in. I mean, her work is very often evolving around UNESCO's World Heritage Sites. So she really make art, or I would say I call her architecture art, that becomes part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And really sustainability is a big trend here. Now, here, this is an amazing space. I happened to do a gig there in Finland several years back. And it's a really interesting story here, because the city of Helsinki was getting quite concerned. Apparently in Finland there's over 3 million saunas, but they thought here the city of Helsinki, how do we really nurture the most important part of our culture, the sauna culture? So they wanted to reinvent that. So the private saunas, yes, very well, 3 million of them, but how do we do something that become places where we can gather as communities? And this was the solution, Lurley, and it comes really high on the sort of experience index. It's one of the must-see in the city of Helsinki. And together with Avanto Architects, they created a space for basically an event space. You can eat there, and of course you can also go and hang out with friends or have a business meeting in the different saunas. And I can say it's really most inspiring, one of the most inspiring experiences I had in 2018. Now, not only is Finland a really important place to look for inspiration, they were voted for the fourth time in a row, the happiest country in the world. Not only that, they are the most digital advanced in Europe. I think 3 and 4 Finns are quite, tech savvy or above average, which is, quite high compared with the 58% of the average of the European Union. But now recently, they have just made a competition for open source opera. So the Finnish National Opera, Ballet, and also the Digital Culture Festival Assembly launched a call for tech concepts to take live performance to new heights, reimagining the experiences of opera performance, envisioning how a live show can be augmented, and then allowing audiences to be immersed in the story itself. It's a bit like transmedia, really. And this will happen in 2022. Now, purpose-driven really is a key word. We see that many of the organizations that had a purpose journey and had asked themselves those sometimes uncomfortable question, what's my purpose? Will my business still be around in 10 years' time? The companies that has done that has been the one that has done best during the corona times. And it's very much about delivering on values, not just value. That brings me to the last section here, really talking about profit or performance, sustainable performance. I think that advances in technology, of course, holds a great potential to deliver empowerment for the people, for the individual, but it's also about creating deeper, more layered experiences for everyone. And we've only seen the beginning with that. I also, again, think this is a fantastic case study. Denmark's second biggest city, and it's always that thing when you are the second biggest city, you are the little brother or the little sister of the capital. But they did very well. They did a collaboration with the Danish-Icelandic Olafur Eliasson, the artist, and he created a permanent 360-degree installation on the rooftop of this particular art museum called Rainbow Panorama. And they wanted really to put themselves on the global art map, and not only that, it was also to increase visitors. Now, they became the cultural capital of 2018, and I guess that this is a really good case study for saying that it really pays to take your thinking to the next level. Now, looking to culture and looking to what's happening in technology, I think that adoption of AI, advanced technologies, is exponentially transforming all areas of society. And we have obviously experienced that, the way we've gone to work, the way we've had to try to reinvent ourselves. But I think as well it is an opportunity to ongoing empower ourselves with opportunities, because those new evolving platforms, we now speak about the meta universe or the metaverse, it enables a whole new plethora of experiences. Theatre of the future has happened. You know, there's been some really inspiring things online, and it's very much about taking performance and experiences to the next level, using transmedia, using the Internet of Things, mixed reality, and of course, everything will not only happen in the theatre, it will also happen online, it will happen before the show, during the show, after the show. And I guess this is very much the sort of co-creation that we already see. So one of the stories I wanted to sort of just end the trends with what I looked at was the Nether. And I saw it was on here in this theatre, I think last week. Did any of you see the Nether? Oh yeah? Did you like it? Oh, you made it? Oh, great. I know that it premiered back in 2013 over in California. I think it was the Kirk Douglas Theatre. But it is a very interesting sci-fi crime drama by the American playwright Jennifer Haley, and it was on in the Royal Court in 2015 in London, and it was really very well received. It's portraying people living in the metaverse, discussing moral and ethical boundaries, because what happens when life as we know it transcend into virtual reality, you know, what are the ethical rules? And I thought very, very interesting piece. Again, it beckons a whole new question. It's about whole new rules, responsibility, inclusion, integrity. They're all cornerstones of all interaction in that ever-evolving digital environment. So when you look at all of those different case studies, the values, I mean, the job as a futurist is trying to connect the dots and reconnect the dots. And with that, when you know the trends, it becomes play. You can literally take some of those trends, plot them into a universe, and start to understand who are the people out there, the creative collaborators, the progressive optimizers, the global sustainers, the idealistic pioneers, just some of the archetypes we see coming to the theatre, but also some of the archetypes that we know. We are maybe even a blend of those. You even have the sort of, cross, hybrid, different type of audiences and people. And also, again, this is part of who we ourselves identify with. So really the 4P outlook here is the drivers of change, and it also tap into some of the values that we would see will be more prominent in the next normal. It is very much about organizations very, very consciously investing not just in the rational dimension of their operation, but also tapping in the softer values, because they have to go hand in hand. And I would really say that very, very important is it's about being the human interface, embedding inclusion and digital integrity in all you say and do to foster an honest engagement. Build social capital, because diversity and collaboration will boost innovation capacity in all areas of your organization. And it's also about creating new, exciting experiences, just like they have done in Finland, and I can't wait to see the result. Show that you care, because when people know you care, then they care too. And this is again about embedding sustainability into all your actions to invite participation. And also for the book, I actually asked 3 different people about the biggest trends in theatre, and independent of each other, they all said sustainability. It's not to do with the content, but it's to do with that really showing that you care. Last but not least, also engage in deep dialogue, because people will partner with brands and organizations that they feel embrace their values. It's about betterness, and that's key to resilience. And really, the future is now. Tomorrow's successful organizations will be those adapting a 4P balance, a 4P bottom line, because once you balance people and planet and you have that purpose that goes with it, that is really key to boosting curiosity and creativity inside your organization. And that is really what it takes to foster a post-corona renaissance. Thank you very much.
So for you, here you go.
Thank you very much. I would normally hug you, but we're going to the UK and all of that.
I understand.
Corona red tape. Thank you so much.
But it's heartfelt. Another applause for Anne Lise Kjaer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tobias.
Thank you. Dames en heren, NTF PRO is nog niet voorbij. U kunt weer naar een volgende meeting gaan. Of u kunt met elkaar in gesprek raken. Dat mag natuurlijk ook. Dus hier om 5 uur nog de staat van het theater. Dan bent u ook van harte welkom. Tot later. Dank u wel.